Number 1. Gerald Arthur Sandusky, known to the world as Jerry Sandusky, was born on January 26, 1944, in Washington, Pennsylvania, and rose to become one of the most respected figures in American college football, a defensive coordinator whose tactical brilliance helped build a legendary dynasty at Penn State University, only to be revealed as a serial predator who used his charity for at-risk youth as a hunting ground for victims, a betrayal so profound that it shattered the legacy of his mentor, the legendary coach Joe Paterno, and forced a reckoning with the enabling culture of big-time college sports. Sandusky was raised in a stable, working-class family, the son of a gym director and a homemaker, and his upbringing in the small town of Washington, Pennsylvania, was defined by sports and discipline, leading him to become a standout athlete at Washington High School before playing football at Penn State, where he graduated in 1966 and immediately began his coaching career as a graduate assistant. He rose quickly through the ranks, becoming the defensive line coach and then the defensive coordinator in 1977, a position he held for over 3 decades, during which time he orchestrated some of the most dominant defenses in college football history, winning 2 national championships and earning a reputation as one of the game's greatest defensive minds, a man who was twice offered head coaching positions at other major universities but declined, claiming he wanted to stay in State College to focus on his charity work. That charity, the Second Mile, founded by Sandusky in 1977 as a group foster home for troubled boys, was in reality a carefully constructed mechanism for gaining access to vulnerable children, providing Sandusky with a seemingly limitless supply of victims who were flattered by the attention of a famous coach and who were unlikely to be believed if they spoke out against him. The victims of Jerry Sandusky were young boys, primarily from broken homes or difficult family situations, whom he met through the Second Mile, and over a period of at least 15 years, he systematically groomed, manipulated, and sexually assaulted them, using his status, his generosity, and his ability to provide gifts, trips, and access to the Penn State football program to buy their silence and the silence of their families. The stories of the victims, who testified at trial using pseudonyms to protect their privacy, reveal a pattern of abuse that began with innocent-seeming acts of affection, hugs, wrestling, and soap battles in the shower that escalated into forced oral and anal sex, acts that left deep psychological scars that many of the victims carried into adulthood, manifesting in addiction, failed relationships, and profound shame. One victim, identified as Victim 4, described how Sandusky treated him like a girlfriend and how he struggled for years to reconcile the man who had been a father figure to him with the man who had raped him, a trauma so severe that he contemplated suicide. The setting for Sandusky's crimes was the idyllic college town of State College, Pennsylvania, a community whose identity was inextricably linked to Penn State football, and where the football program was treated with a reverence that bordered on religious, a culture that made it almost impossible for anyone to believe that a beloved coach could be capable of such horrific acts. The timeline of events leading to Sandusky's exposure is a tragic tale of missed opportunities and institutional failure, with the first known investigation occurring in 1998, when an 11-year-old boy reported that Sandusky had showered with him and engaged in inappropriate contact, an investigation that was closed without charges after the local district attorney declined to prosecute, a decision that allowed Sandusky to continue his abuse for another decade. In 2001, a graduate assistant named Michael McQuarrie witnessed Sandusky raping a young boy in the shower of the Penn State football building and reported it to Coach Joe Paterno, who informed the athletic director. But despite knowing of the 1998 investigation, university officials failed to report the incident to police or Child Protective Services, instead choosing to ban Sandusky from bringing children into the facility, a half measure that did nothing to stop his predation. The discovery and initial investigation that finally brought Sandusky to justice began in 2008, when a high school guidance counselor reported that a student, identified as Victim 1, had disclosed sexual abuse by Sandusky, triggering an investigation by the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office and a grand jury that heard testimony from multiple victims and witnesses. The forensic investigation involved the meticulous work of state police investigators who tracked down victims through records from the Second Mile and conducted interviews that corroborated the pattern of abuse, as well as the examination of emails and records from Penn State that revealed the university's knowledge of the allegations and its failure to act. The breakthrough in the investigation came with the testimony of Michael McCreary and the identification of multiple victims who were willing to testify, providing a compelling body of evidence that led to Sandusky's indictment in November 2011 on 40 counts of child sexual abuse, a stunning development that immediately rocked the college football world and led to the firing of Joe Paterno, the most winning coach in major college football history. The arrest occurred on November 5, 2011, when Sandusky turned himself in to authorities in State College, maintaining his innocence and claiming that he was the victim of a witch hunt, a defense that was met with widespread skepticism and outrage. The legal proceedings were a national spectacle, with the trial beginning on June 11, 2012, in the Center County Courthouse, and the prosecution presenting a powerful case built on the testimony of 8 victims who described in graphic detail the abuse they suffered, as well as the testimony of Michael McCreary and other witnesses who established the university's knowledge of Sandusky's behavior. The defense, led by attorney Joe Amendola, attempted to portray the victims as opportunists seeking financial gain and suggested that Sandusky's behavior was misinterpreted and that he suffered from a personality disorder, a strategy that failed to sway the jury, which deliberated for 21 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on 45 of the 48 counts against him, including involuntary deviate sexual intercourse, indecent assault, and endangering the welfare of children. The sentencing hearing took place on October 9, 2012, and Judge John Cleland sentenced Sandusky to 30 to 60 years in state prison, effectively a life sentence for the 68-year-old former coach, a sentence that ensured he would die behind bars. Following his conviction, Sandusky was transferred to the State Correctional Institution at Greene, a maximum security prison in southwestern Pennsylvania, where he remains as of the most recent reports, serving his sentence in protective custody due to the high-profile nature of his case and the hostility he faces from other inmates. The lasting impact of the Sandusky case is immeasurable, leading to the imposition of unprecedented sanctions on the Penn State football program, including a $60 million fine and the vacating of wins, the resignation of the university president, and a national conversation about the responsibility of institutions to protect children and the dangers of placing athletic programs on pedestals, with the case serving as a cautionary tale for universities and sports organizations around the world. Number 2. Lawrence Gerard Nassar, the former team doctor for USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University, was born on August 16, 1963, in Farmington Hills, Michigan, and rose to become one of the most respected sports medicine physicians in the world, a man who treated Olympic gold medalists and ordinary athletes alike, and who used his position of trust and his reputation for healing to perpetrate one of the largest sexual abuse scandals in sports history, molesting hundreds of young girls and women under the guise of medical treatment. Nassar was raised in a middle-class Catholic family and attended North Farmington High School, where he was a member of the gymnastics team, a connection that would shape his career and provide him with access to his future victims, and he went on to earn a degree in kinesiology from the University of Michigan and a medical degree from Michigan State University, completing his residency in family practice before joining the medical staff at Michigan State and USA Gymnastics. He was known for his affable demeanor, his willingness to treat athletes at any hour, and his mastery of osteopathic manipulation, a technique that he used to gain the trust of his patients, before using the cover of medical procedures to sexually assault them, a betrayal so profound that it left his victims questioning their own sanity and their trust in the medical profession. The victims of Larry Nassar were predominantly young female gymnasts, ranging in age from 6 to 29, who came to him seeking treatment for injuries and pain, and who were subjected to a pattern of abuse that involved intravaginal penetration under the pretense of performing pelvic floor therapy, a procedure that he performed without gloves, without consent, and often in the presence of parents who were positioned in such a way that they could not see what was happening. The sheer number of victims is staggering, with over 300 women and girls coming forward to report abuse, including Olympic champions like Simone Biles, Ali Raisman, Michaela Maroney, and Gabby Douglas, who revealed that they had been abused by Nassar while training for the 2012 and 2016 Olympic Games, shattering the illusion of the Fierce Five and the gold medal dream team. The setting for Nassar's crimes was the insular and high-pressure world of elite gymnastics, a culture of obedience and silence where young athletes were trained to endure pain and authority, and where the pursuit of perfection created an environment ripe for exploitation. The timeline of his abuse spans decades, with the first known incidents occurring in the early 1990s and continuing until his firing from Michigan State in 2016, a period during which he rose to the pinnacle of his profession, serving as the National Medical Coordinator for USA Gymnastics from 1996 to 2014. The discovery and initial investigation began in 2016, when a former gymnast named Rachel Den Hollander filed a police report alleging that Nassar had sexually assaulted her in 2000, a report that was soon followed by others, including former Michigan State softball player Tiffany Thomas Lopez and former gymnast Jamie Danster, who told the Indianapolis Star that Nassar had abused them. The forensic investigation involved the work of the Michigan State University Police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which seized thousands of images of child pornography from Nassar's home, as well as medical records and correspondence that documented his long history of abuse. The breakthrough in the investigation came with the courageous decision of Rachel Den Hollander and other victims to speak publicly, breaking the wall of silence that had protected Nassar for so long, and leading to his arrest in December 2016 on federal child pornography charges, a charge that was later expanded to include sexual abuse of children in federal custody. The legal proceedings were a series of dramatic courtroom moments, beginning with his guilty plea in federal court to child pornography charges in July 2017, for which he was sentenced to 60 years in prison, followed by guilty pleas in state court to 10 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct in 2 separate counties. The sentencing hearings were extraordinary events in which over 200 victims delivered impact statements in open court, confronting Nassar and describing the devastating impact of his abuse, statements that drew international attention to the case and led to the resignation of the entire board of USA Gymnastics and the president of Michigan State University. The sentencing hearing in Ingham County, Michigan, took place on January 24, 2018, and Judge Rosemary Aquilina sentenced Nassar to 40 to 175 years in prison, to be served consecutively with his federal sentence, a sentence that ensures he will never be a free man again. Following his conviction, Nassar was transferred to the United States Penitentiary, Coleman, a high-security federal prison in Florida, where he was assaulted by another inmate shortly after his arrival, and he is currently serving his sentence in the federal prison system, with a projected release date that is effectively life imprisonment. The lasting impact of the Nassar case is a watershed moment in the history of sports, leading to a massive restructuring of USA Gymnastics, a $500 million settlement for his victims, and the passage of the Protecting Young Victims from Sexual Abuse and Safe Sport Authorization Act, a federal law designed to prevent abuse in amateur sports, as well as a global reckoning with the issue of sexual abuse and the power dynamics in youth sports, a legacy that will forever be linked to the courage of the survivors who spoke out and demanded justice. Number 3. Barry Bennell, a former youth football coach and scout in the United Kingdom, was exposed as one of the most prolific sexual predators in the history of British sports, a man who used his position to abuse countless young boys over a span of 3 decades, destroying lives and haunting the world of professional football for generations. Bennell, born in Manchester in 1954, was a charismatic and influential figure in the youth football system, working for major clubs including Manchester City, Crewe Alexandra, and Stoke City, as well as coaching youth teams in the United States. He was known for his ability to spot talent and his willingness to take young players on trips and to his home, earning the trust of parents who dreamed of professional careers for their sons. Behind this facade of mentorship, Bennell was a calculating predator who used his power to groom and sexually assault young boys, often hosting sleepovers at his home where the abuse took place. The victims of Barry Bennell were young footballers, often aged between 11 and 15, who idolized him and saw him as a gateway to a professional career. The scale of his abuse is staggering, with police identifying over 100 potential victims, and Bennell himself admitting to having a sexual appetite for young boys. One victim, Andy Woodward, broke his silence in 2016, revealing the decades of trauma he had suffered and sparking a massive investigation that uncovered the full extent of Bennell's crimes. The setting for Bennell's crimes was the youth football system in the United Kingdom, a culture that at the time was largely unregulated and placed immense power in the hands of coaches, often overlooking warning signs in the pursuit of developing talented players. The timeline of his abuse spans from the 1970s to the 1990s, during which time he was able to move between clubs and countries with little scrutiny. The discovery and initial investigation into Bennell began with the courage of Andy Woodward, who spoke to the Guardian newspaper in November 2016, prompting other victims to come forward and leading to a massive investigation by the Cheshire Police. The forensic investigation involved the meticulous work of detectives who gathered testimony from dozens of victims and reviewed historical records from the football clubs involved. The breakthrough in the investigation came with the sheer number of victims who came forward, providing a compelling body of evidence that led to Bennell's being charged with multiple counts of historical sexual abuse. The legal proceedings were a landmark moment in British sport, with Bennell standing trial at Liverpool Crown Court in 2018. The prosecution presented evidence from 12 victims, detailing the systematic abuse they had suffered, and the defense offered little in the way of mitigation, with Bennell's own lawyer describing his client as a predator. The jury deliberated for a short time before returning a guilty verdict on 36 counts of sexual abuse, and Judge Clement Goldstone sentenced Bennell to 31 years in prison, effectively a life sentence for the 64-year-old former coach. Following his conviction, Bennell was transferred to a high-security prison in the UK, where he remains as of the most recent reports. The lasting impact of the Barry Bennell case has been profound, leading to a major independent review of child sexual abuse in football, known as the Sheldon Report, and forcing the Football Association and professional clubs to implement stringent safeguarding measures to protect young players. Number 4. Graham James, a former junior ice hockey coach in Canada, was a predator who used his position of authority to sexually abuse young players, including several who would go on to careers in the National Hockey League, a betrayal that shocked the Canadian sports community and forced a reckoning with the issue of abuse in minor hockey. James, born in 1952, was a respected coach in the Western Hockey League, WHL, coaching teams like the Swift Current Broncos and the Calgary Hitmen, and he was instrumental in developing players who would reach the highest levels of the sport. He was known for his intense coaching style and his close relationships with his players, relationships that he exploited to identify and groom vulnerable young boys. The victims of Graham James were young hockey players, including former NHL star Theo Fleury and his cousin, Todd Holt, who filed a criminal complaint against James in 2009. Theo Fleury, in his memoir Playing with Fire, detailed the abuse he suffered at the hands of James and the devastating impact it had on his life, including his struggles with addiction and mental health. The setting for James's crimes was the junior hockey system, a high-pressure environment where young players often live away from home and are dependent on their coaches for their development and their careers, a dynamic that James exploited to his advantage. The timeline of his abuse spans the 1980s and 1990s, during which time he was a dominant figure in the WHL. The discovery and initial investigation began with the publication of Fleury's memoir and his subsequent decision to file a police report, which led to an investigation by the Calgary Police Service. The forensic investigation involved the review of historical records and interviews with victims, as well as the cooperation of the Western Hockey League. The breakthrough in the investigation came with the corroboration of Fleury's account by other victims, leading to James being charged with sexual assault in 2010. The legal proceedings were a significant moment in Canadian sports history, with James pleading guilty to charges of sexual assault against Fleury and Holt in 2012. The sentencing hearing took place on March 20, 2012, and Judge Danielle Cote-McGillan sentenced James to 2 years in prison, a sentence that was widely criticized as lenient and that was later appealed by the Crown. In 2013, a new judge increased the sentence to 4 years, but James was granted parole in 2014 after serving only a fraction of his sentence. The lasting impact of the Graham James case has been a heightened awareness of the issue of sexual abuse in minor hockey and a push for stricter screening and monitoring of coaches and volunteers, as well as a greater focus on supporting victims and encouraging them to come forward. The case also highlighted the failures of the justice system in dealing with historical sexual abuse and the need for harsher penalties for predators who prey on children. Number 5. Rick Curl, a former prominent swimming coach and founder of the Curlburg Swim Club, was a predator who used his position of trust to sexually abuse a teenage swimmer, a betrayal that destroyed his legacy and exposed the dark side of the world of elite youth swimming. Curl, born in 1954, was a highly respected coach who founded the Curlburg Swim Club, now known as the nation's capital swim club, one of the most successful swim clubs in the United States, producing Olympians and national champions. He was known for his rigorous training methods and his ability to motivate swimmers, earning the trust of parents and athletes alike. The victim of Rick Curl was Kelly Curran, a teenage swimmer whom he began coaching in the early 1980s. Curl began a sexual relationship with Curran when she was 13 years old, a relationship that lasted for several years and involved him taking her on trips and having sexual intercourse with her at his home and at swim meets. The abuse was discovered by Curran's parents, who hired a private investigator and found a diary that detailed the relationship. The discovery and initial investigation led to a secret settlement in 1989, in which Curl agreed to pay Curran $150,000 in exchange for her silence, a deal that allowed him to continue coaching for more than 2 decades. The forensic investigation that finally brought Curl to justice began in 2012, when Curran, now an adult, decided to break her silence and report the abuse to the police, inspired by the victims of Jerry Sandusky and Larry Nassar. The investigation involved the Montgomery County Police Department in Maryland, which interviewed Curran and gathered evidence, including the 1989 settlement agreement. The breakthrough in the investigation came with Curran's testimony and the documentation of the settlement, which corroborated her account. The legal proceedings began in 2013, with Curl being indicted on charges of child sexual abuse. In August 2013, Curl pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree sexual abuse of a minor. The sentencing hearing took place on August 22, 2013, and Judge John Maloney sentenced Curl to 15 years in prison, with all but 7 years suspended, and 5 years of supervised probation. Following his conviction, Curl was transferred to the Montgomery County Detention Center and later to the Maryland Division of Correction to serve his sentence. The lasting impact of the Rick Curl case was a scandal that rocked the swimming community, leading to USA Swimming implementing new safe sport policies and background check requirements for coaches. The case also served as a reminder of the importance of listening to victims and the dangers of institutions prioritizing reputation over the safety of children. Thank you for watching to the end of this documentary. If you found this in-depth examination of abuse in sports informative, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. A like on this video helps tremendously with the algorithm and allows this content to reach more viewers. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Which of these cases had the greatest impact on you, and what are your thoughts on protecting young athletes? I am also genuinely curious to know where in the world you are watching from right now, as this channel reaches a global audience and it is always fascinating to see the diverse locations of our community. Thank you again for your time and attention, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.